Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different. 7 simple words scrawled on a crumpled piece of paper. Words meant to hurt, to diminish, to destroy. Words that a young black boy from a working-class family in Stevenage, England should have thrown away and forgotten. But Lewis Hamilton didn't throw that note away. He kept it. He read it before races. He carried it through decades of competition, from rickety go-karts to the most advanced racing machines on the planet. Those 7 words became his secret weapon, a constant reminder of all the people who said he didn't belong, couldn't compete, wouldn't succeed. What Lewis never knew was that the note had a second page, one he wouldn't discover until years later, long after those cruel words had helped drive him to become the greatest Formula One driver in history. This is the true story of how a bully's taunt became championship fuel, and how understanding someone's full story can change everything. The alarm clock rang at 5:30 a.m. Anthony Hamilton quickly turned it off so it wouldn't wake the rest of the family. He rubbed his tired eyes and got ready for his first job of the day. By evening, he would have worked 3 different jobs. That was life for the Hamilton family in Stevenage, a regular town about 30 miles north of London, England. In another room, 8-year-old Lewis was already awake. He wasn't thinking about how his family didn't have much money. He was thinking about cars. Lewis loved cars more than anything. He could name every Formula One driver and the cars they drove. His small bedroom walls were covered with posters of racing cars and drivers like Ayrton Senna, his biggest hero. "Lewis, breakfast!" his stepmom Linda called from the kitchen. Lewis jumped out of bed and raced downstairs. His dad was already at the table, drinking coffee before heading to work. "Someone's full of energy this morning," Anthony said with a smile. "Dad, can we watch the race on Sunday?" "Please?" Lewis asked, his eyes wide with hope. Anthony ruffled his son's curly hair. "We'll see, champ. But remember, you promised to finish your homework first." Lewis nodded quickly. School wasn't his favorite place. The other kids sometimes made fun of him for being smaller than them. Some also teased him about being one of the few black kids in class. But Lewis tried not to let it bother him. "Eat up now," Linda said, placing a bowl of cereal in front of him. "You don't want to be late for school." Later that week, Anthony surprised Lewis after school. "I've got something special planned," he said with a mysterious smile. They drove to a place called Rye House Kart Circuit. Lewis's eyes grew wide as he saw kids not much older than him zooming around a track in small racing carts. "What is this place, Dad?" Lewis asked, pressing his face against the fence. "This is where racers start, son. These are go-karts. What do you think? Want to try?" Lewis couldn't believe his ears. "Really? I can drive one?" Anthony nodded. "I saved up a bit. You can have a few laps in a rental cart." Lewis could barely contain his excitement as a track worker helped him into a cart and explained how to use the pedals and steering wheel. The helmet felt heavy on his small head, but Lewis didn't care. This was the closest he'd ever been to real racing. "Remember what I told you," the track worker said. "Brake before the turns, not during." Lewis nodded, but his mind was already on the track. When they finally let him go, something magical happened. The world around him disappeared. There was only Lewis, the cart, and the track. He felt free. Anthony watched from the sidelines, surprised by what he saw. His son wasn't just driving around like the other first-timers. Lewis was already trying to find the fastest way around the track, taking turns in a way that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old who had never driven before. When Lewis's time was up, he didn't want to stop. "Dad, did you see? Did you see how fast I was going?" Louis bounced with excitement. "I sure did," Anthony said, looking at his son with new eyes. The track manager had come over too. "Your boy's got natural talent," the manager said. "I've never seen a first-timer drive like that. He's got a feel for it." On the drive home, Louis couldn't stop talking about the karts. He described every turn, every sensation. Anthony listened, thinking hard. 2 weeks later, Anthony took Louis back to the house, but this time they went to the garage. Inside was an old used go-kart. "Dad?" Louis asked, not believing his eyes. "It's not new, and it needs some work," Anthony explained. "I got it secondhand." "But it's yours, Louis." Louis ran his hand over the cart, unable to speak. "Now listen," Anthony said, kneeling to look his son in the eyes. "This is going to be hard work. I'll support your racing, but I need promises from you. You must work hard at school, no slacking on homework, and you have to help me maintain the cart. Deal?" "Deal," Louis said without hesitation. He hugged his dad tight. "I promise I'll work super hard. I'll be the best student and the best racer." Anthony smiled, hoping he was making the right choice. Money would be even tighter now. He would need to work extra shifts to pay for Louis's racing. But seeing the joy in his son's eyes made it worthwhile. What neither of them knew was just how far this old go-kart would take them. They didn't know about the challenges ahead, the bullies Louis would face at school, the racism they would encounter at the tracks, or the financial struggles that would test their family. They didn't know that one day the small boy from Stevenage would become the greatest Formula One driver in history. All they knew on that day was that Louis had found something special. He had found his purpose. As Louis sat in his cart, gripping the steering wheel, he made a silent promise to himself. One day, he thought, I'll be a champion, and somewhere in the future, that promise waited to be kept. Louis bounced excitedly on his toes as the school bell rang. Another day done meant another evening at the track, but as he gathered his books, a shadow fell across his desk. Where are you rushing off to, Hamilton? Trevor Matthews stood over him, a full head taller with a smirk on his face. Trevor was the most popular boy in class, and he made sure everyone knew it. Just going home, Louis said quietly, trying to move past. Trevor blocked his path. Heard you're playing with toy cars now. Baby stuff. Some other kids laughed. Louis felt his cheeks grow hot, but remembered what his dad always said. Let your racing do the talking. Ms. Parker, their teacher, called from the doorway. Everything okay here? Trevor stepped back. Just chatting, miss. Louis hurried out, clutching his backpack tight against his chest. This wasn't new. Being one of the only black kids in school made him stand out. Some kids didn't like different. Sound it out, Louis. Take your time. Ms. Parker sat beside him during reading time. Louis stared at the page, the letters jumping and swimming before his eyes. The boy. The words blurred together. His throat felt tight. From across the room, he heard snickering. Trevor whispered something to his friends, and they all looked at Louis. Later, the school nurse explained to Anthony and Linda that Louis had dyslexia. It makes reading difficult for him, but it doesn't affect his intelligence at all, she assured them. Is there anything we can do to help? Linda asked. Extra practice at home, patience, and maybe some specialized tutoring if possible. Anthony nodded, mentally calculating how many extra shifts this would mean. Whatever he needs. At the karting track, none of that mattered. Here, Louis wasn't the black kid or the boy who couldn't read well. He was just fast. Keep your line. Through the corner, Anthony called out as Louis whizzed past. That's it. Perfect. Every weekend, They traveled to races. The Hamilton family car was easily spotted, the one packed with tools, a go-kart, and tires. Anthony learned to be mechanic, manager, and cheerleader all in one. When they couldn't afford new parts, he figured out how to fix the old ones. "Dad, the Johnson family has a brand new cart," Louis said one day, watching a shiny cart being unloaded from an expensive truck. Anthony put his hand on Louis's shoulder. "It's not about having the best equipment, son. It's about being the best driver." Louis nodded, but he still felt the difference. The other families didn't look like his. They had more money, nicer clothes, and weren't usually the only black faces in the crowd. "We have a special project today," Ms. Parker announced to the class. "You'll work in pairs to create a presentation about what you want to be when you grow up." Louis perked up. "This was easy. I've assigned the pairs," Ms. Parker continued, reading from her list. "Lewis Hamilton and Trevor Matthews." Louis's heart sank. Trevor looked equally unhappy as he dragged his chair over. "So what do you want to be?" Trevor asked with a bored expression. "A Formula One driver," Louis answered without hesitation. Trevor snorted. "Yeah, right. Name one F1 driver who looks like you." Louis opened his mouth but realized he couldn't. He'd never seen a black F1 driver. "I'll be the first then," he said firmly. "Yeah, well, I want to be an astronaut," Trevor said. "But at least I can read the instructions to get to space." Louis felt a hot lump in his throat but swallowed it down. "What should our project be about then? Let's just do something normal. Nobody becomes a race car driver from Stevenage." The next day, Trevor was showing something to a group of laughing students before class. When Louis walked in, they went quiet, then burst into louder laughter. Throughout the morning, Louis noticed a piece of paper being passed from student to student. Each time, there were giggles and glances in his direction. When the note finally reached his desk, Louis unfolded it slowly. In Trevor's handwriting, it read, "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." Below that was a crude drawing of a car crashing into a wall with a stick figure flying out. "Louis, please share what's so interesting," Ms. Parker said, suddenly beside his desk. Before he could hide it, she took the paper. Her face darkened as she read it. "Trevor Matthews, to the principal's office." "Now." The class went silent. Trevor glared at Louis as he left the room. After school, Louis took a detour to the trash bin outside Ms. Parker's classroom. He dug through until he found the crumpled note. Something made him smooth it out and tuck it into his pocket. That evening at the track, Louis drove faster than ever before. "Where did that come from?" Anthony asked, amazed by his son's lap times. Louis just shrugged, feeling the note inside his pocket. He didn't tell his dad about it. He didn't tell anyone. But every time he felt like giving up, when the kids laughed at his reading, when the richer families looked down at their second-hand equipment, when he heard whispers about being different, he remembered those words. "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." Louis taped the note inside his helmet that night, not to feel sad, but to prove it wrong. Different didn't have to mean worse. Maybe different could even mean special. As he fell asleep, Louis didn't know that the note would stay with him for years to come, through victories and defeats, through broken friendships and world championships. The words that were meant to hurt him would instead become the fuel that helped drive him toward his dreams. By his 10th birthday, Louis had won his first karting championship. The trophy sat on his bedside table, next to a photo of Ayrton Senna. Every morning when he woke up, it reminded him that he belonged on the track. "Dad, do you think Senna ever got bullied?" Louis asked one evening as they worked on his kart in their garage. Anthony wiped grease from his hands. Everyone faces challenges. Lewis, even champions. Even if they're different? Anthony paused, studying his son's face. Especially if they're different. Being different is what makes champions stand out. Lewis thought about the note hidden in his helmet, but didn't mention it. Instead, he focused on the engine part they were fixing. On weekends, the Hamiltons traveled all over England for races. Lewis was beating kids 2 or 3 years older than him. Race organizers sometimes checked his age twice, not believing someone so young could drive so fast. "The boy's got raw talent," one official told Anthony. "He races like he was born to do it." Word about Lewis spread through the karting world. A small crowd now gathered whenever he raced. Some parents didn't like that their children were being beaten by a younger, black kid from a working-class family. "They probably modified the engine," Lewis overheard one father say. "No way he's that fast, naturally." Lewis pretended not to hear, but later that night, he took out Trevor's note and read it again. "Too different," it said. He was starting to understand that different meant not welcome to some people. When Lewis was 12, his big chance came. The McLaren Formula One team sponsored a karting award ceremony, and Ron Dennis, the team boss, was there to present trophies. Lewis won his category and stood nervously on stage. "And what's your name, young man?" Ron asked, handing him the trophy. "Lewis Hamilton, sir," Lewis answered, trying to sound confident despite his racing heart. Then, without planning it, he added, "I'm going to race for you one day." The room fell silent. Ron Dennis raised an eyebrow, then smiled. "Well, that's confidence. Call me in 9 years." People laughed, but Lewis didn't mind. He had said what he meant. On the drive home, Anthony couldn't stop chuckling. "You really told Ron Dennis you'd drive for him. Do you think he believed me?" Lewis asked. "I don't know, son, but I believed you." School remained difficult. Trevor and his friends grew more creative with their taunts as Lewis's karting success continued. "Racing boy thinks he's special," Trevor said loudly in the hallway. "Too bad he can't read the rule book." One day, Lewis came home with a black eye. "What happened?" Linda gasped, applying a cold cloth to his face. Lewis shrugged. "Nothing." But Anthony wasn't letting it go. "Talk to me, son." Later, alone in the EA garage, Lewis finally opened up. "Trevor said I only win races because the other drivers feel sorry for me. He said I don't belong in racing or at school." Lewis's voice cracked. "He pushed me, so I pushed back. Then he hit me." Anthony took a deep breath. "Lewis, listen carefully. There will always be people who try to push you down. Some because of your skin color, some because they're jealous, some just because they can." "So, what do I do?" Lewis asked, tears welling up. "You stand up for yourself, but not with your fists." Anthony placed his hand over Lewis's heart. "With this, with determination. You show them on the track. You let your racing speak for you." That night, Lewis took out Trevor's note again. He read it slowly, feeling each word. Then he carefully pinned it inside his helmet where he could see it before every race. Lewis had a race that weekend. As he sat in his cart waiting for the start, he read the note one more time. "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." When the lights went green, Lewis shot off the line like he was launched from a rocket. He drove with a new kind of fire, passing carts on corners where passing seemed impossible. After he took the checkered flag, Anthony rushed over. "That was incredible! Where did that come from?" Lewis just smiled. He couldn't explain that the "aho" words meant to hurt him had somehow made him stronger. Being different wasn't his weakness. It was becoming his superpower. By 14, Lewis was signed to McLaren's Young Driver program. Ron Dennis himself had noticed the boy's talent and remembered his bold promise. "We're investing in your future," Ron told Lewis. "Don't let us down." The program meant better equipment, professional coaching, and a path to real racing cars. It also meant more pressure. As Lewis moved up to faster karts and bigger races, the note stayed with him. Before each race, as other drivers psyched themselves up with music or rituals, Lewis would quietly read those words. "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." Then he would close his eyes, take a deep breath, and prove them wrong one lap at a time. Lewis Hamilton stood on the top step of the podium, the British Karting Championship trophy gleaming in his hands. At 15, he was already being called a future star. "You've done it, son," Anthony said, his eyes shining with pride. Few people knew the sacrifices behind this moment. The countless nights Anthony had worked extra shifts, the times he'd slept in his car at racetracks to save money for hotel rooms, the second mortgage on their home to buy better equipment. As cameras flashed, Lewis thought about the note hidden in his helmet. Each victory felt like erasing one word from Trevor's cruel message. In the pits after the race, a man in a racing suit approached Lewis. "Impressive driving out there," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Nico Rosberg." Lewis knew who he was. Nico was the son of former Formula One world champion Keke Rosberg and already making waves in European karting. "Thanks," Lewis said, shaking Nico's hand. "Your race was great too." "Maybe we'll race in Formula One together someday," Nico said with a smile. Lewis nodded. "I hope so." Neither boy could have guessed how their friendly handshake would one day turn into one of the fiercest rivalries in motorsport history. At 16, Lewis moved up to car racing in the Formula Renault series. The cars were faster and more powerful than karts. The first time he tested one, Lewis could barely contain his excitement. "It's amazing, Dad," he shouted, jumping out of the car. "I could feel everything through the steering wheel." But the jump to cars meant more expenses. Entry fees, travel costs, and equipment all added up. Anthony was working 3 jobs now. Some nights, Lewis would find his dad asleep at the kitchen table, still in his work clothes, surrounded by bills. "Maybe I should stop racing," Lewis suggested, one morning, seeing the dark circles under his father's eyes. Anthony looked up sharply. "Don't you ever say that. We started this journey together, and we'll finish it together." That night, Lewis made a promise to himself. He would make it to Formula One, not just for himself, but for his dad, too. Formula Renault races took Lewis all over Europe. He was no longer just racing British kids. Now he faced drivers from Italy, France, Germany, and Finland, countries with deep racing traditions. Some of his competitors came from wealthy families with racing backgrounds. They had private coaches, the best equipment, and didn't need to worry about money. Lewis still felt like an outsider, but now he used that feeling as fuel. Before each race, as he prepared in the garage, Lewis would quietly pull out Trevor's Smitry's note. The paper was getting worn from being handled so often, the creases deep, but the words were still clear. "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." Then he would put on his helmet and drive like he had something to prove. Because he did. In his second year of Formula Renault, Lewis won the championship. Reporters started to take notice of the young black driver from Stevenage who was beating everyone. "What's your secret?" one journalist asked after Lewis won a particularly difficult race in the rain. Lewis smiled. "No secret, just determination." At D18, Lewis moved up to Formula 3, where the cars were even faster. The competition was tougher too. Many Formula 3 drivers went on to Formula 1, so everyone was fighting hard for attention. In his first race, Lewis finished third. It wasn't the win he wanted, but standing on the podium, he spotted his dad in the crowd, clapping proudly. That meant more than any trophy. "You're doing great," Ron Dennis told Lewis after the race. "McLaren is watching your progress." Knowing that McLaren, one of the top Formula One teams, was tracking his career, made Lewis work even harder. He stayed late after practice sessions, studying data with engineers. He exercised every day to build his strength and stamina, and he never stopped thinking about that note. In his second year of Formula 3, Lewis dominated the championship. He won 15 of 20 races, a record that seemed almost impossible. The Hamilton Express, newspapers called him. Motorsport magazines put him on their covers. People were starting to talk about him as a once-in-a-generation talent. After winning the Formula 3 championship, Lewis received a call from McLaren. "We're moving you up to GP2, Ron Dennis said. "It's the final step before Formula 1. GP2 was just one level below Formula 1. Drivers who won in GP2 almost always got a Formula 1 seat. This was Lewis's big chance. GP2 cars were the fastest Lewis had ever driven. They had nearly 600 horsepower, almost 10 times more than his first go-kart. The speeds were incredible, and the racing was intense. In his first GP2 test, Lewis was faster than drivers with years more experience. The McLaren team watched with growing excitement. They knew they had something special in the young driver. From Stevenage, Lewis's first GP2 race was at the famous Nürburgring circuit in Germany. Rain poured down, making the track slippery and dangerous. Many drivers went off the track, crashing in the difficult conditions. In the garage before the race, Lewis took out Trevor's note as he always did. The paper was so fragile now that he kept it in a small plastic sleeve. The words had been with him for almost 10 years, pushing him forward when things got tough. When the race started, Lewis showed his special talent in the rain. While others struggled for grip, he seemed to dance the car around the track. He finished first, 20 seconds ahead of second place, an enormous gap in racing. In the press conference after the race, a journalist asked, "How did you stay so calm in those conditions?" Lewis thought about the note but simply said, "I love racing in the rain. It separates the good from the great." Lewis won the GP2 championship in 2006, his first year in the series. It was an outstanding achievement that caught the attention of the entire Formula One paddock. After the final race, Anthony hugged his son tight. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." Lewis felt tears in his eyes. The journey from that second-hand go-kart to here had been long and hard, but they had made it together. That night, alone in his hotel room, Lewis took out Trevor's note one more time. Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different. He smiled to himself. One more level to go. Lewis was at home helping his dad fix the lawnmower when his phone rang. The screen showed unknown number. He almost didn't answer, thinking it might be a sales call. "Hello?" he said, wiping grease from his hands. "Lewis? It's Ron Dennis." Lewis's heart skipped a beat. Ron Dennis, the boss of McLaren Formula One team, was calling him directly. "Hello, sir," Lewis managed to say, giving his dad a wide-eyed look. "Remember what you said to me 9 years ago? About racing for me one day?" Ron asked. "Yes, sir. I remember." "Well, I'm calling." There was a pause. "We want you in Formula One next season, as a McLaren driver." Lewis nearly dropped the phone. At 22, His dream was coming true. "Are you serious?" Lewis whispered. "Deadly serious," Ron replied. "You've earned it. We're announcing it next week." After hanging up, Lewis sprinted around the yard, whooping with joy. Anthony watched, confused, until Lewis explained. "Dad! I made it! I'm going to be a Formula One driver." Anthony dropped his tools and grabbed his son in a bear hug. Years of sacrifice, doubt, and hardship dissolved in that moment. They had done what many thought impossible. A black kid from a working-class family in Stevenage had made it to the pinnacle of motorsport. That night, Lewis sat alone in his bedroom, holding Trevor's note. From this small piece of paper to Formula One. The journey seemed unreal. The news of Lewis's signing made headlines around the world. Not only was he going straight into one of the best teams, but he would be teammates with Fernando Alonso, the reigning double world champion. "Hamilton is being thrown in at the deep end," one racing commentator said. "Alonso will show him how much he has to learn." Others were more blunt. "The black kid from Britain won't last a season against Alonso." Lewis saved these comments, mentally adding them to Trevor's note. More fuel for his fire. His first Formula One car was the McLaren MP422. The first time Lewis sat in it during testing, he felt like he was inside a spaceship. The car had more than 750 horsepower and could go from 0 to 100 mph in less than 3 seconds. "This is incredible," Lewis told his engineer after his first few laps. But being a Formula One driver wasn't just about the racing. Suddenly, Lewis was famous. Cameras followed him everywhere. Journalists asked about his background, his family, and what it meant to be the first black Formula One driver. "I don't see myself as making history," Lewis told them. "I just see myself as a racing driver who happens to be black." In private, though, Lewis understood the significance. He had never seen anyone who looked like him in Formula One. Now, black kids around the world would see him and know it was possible. The first race of the 2007 season was in Australia. Lewis was so nervous he could barely eat breakfast. "Just treat it like any other race," Anthony advised. But it wasn't like any other race. This was Formula One, the highest level of motorsport in the world, and Lewis was about to compete against drivers he'd grown up watching on TV. As he prepared in the garage, Lewis took out Trevor's note, now protected in a small laminated case. He'd carried these words with him from go-karts all the way to Formula One. Reading them still gave him a jolt of determination. When he walked to the grid, Lewis tried to stay calm. His car was starting from 4th position, not bad for a rookie. Ahead of him were Alonso, Kimi Räikkönen, and Nick Heidfeld. All experienced drivers. The 5 red lights came on one by one, then went out. Lewis's first Formula One start was perfect. He overtook Heidfeld into the first corner and moved into 3rd place. Throughout the race, Lewis drove with the confidence of a veteran. He wasn't intimidated by the big names around him. He was one of them now. When he crossed the finish line, in 3rd place, Lewis had made history. No rookie had ever finished on the podium in their first race in over 10 years. "Unbelievable drive," his race engineer said over the radio. "You belong here, Lewis." On the podium, spraying champagne beside Kimi Räikkönen and Fernando Alonso, Lewis thought about how far he'd come. From the boy who was told he'd never be a winner to standing among the best drivers in the world. Back in the garage, Ron Dennis hugged him. "That was exceptional, but this is just the beginning." Lewis nodded. He knew he could win races, maybe even championships. The note that had driven him for so long was being proven wrong with every lap. That night, alone in his hotel room, Lewis called his dad. "How do you feel?" Anthony asked. Lewis thought for a moment. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." And somewhere in Stevenage, a boy who once wrote a cruel note watched the race on TV, not knowing how his words had helped shape a champion. After Australia, Formula One experts predicted Lewis would return to reality. "Beginner's luck," they called it, but in Malaysia, the second race of the season, Lewis finished second. In Bahrain, second again. Then another second place in Spain. "The rookie is making Alonso nervous," one newspaper headline read. Fernando Alonso, his teammate and the reigning champion, didn't look happy on the podium standing next to Lewis. By the fifth race in Monaco, the most famous race in the world, people weren't talking about Lewis as just a good rookie anymore. They were talking about him as a championship contender. "How does it feel to be fighting for the title in your first season?" a journalist asked. Lewis thought carefully before answering. "I'm just taking it one race at a time. I've dreamed of racing in Formula One since I was a kid. Now I'm here. I want to make the most of it." What he didn't say was how he still read Trevor's note before each race. How those words, "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different," still pushed him to prove doubters wrong. In June 2007, Lewis arrived at the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal. The track was fast with long straights and tight corners. During practice, he was quickest in every session. "You're flying today," his race engineer told him over the radio. In qualifying, Lewis earned his first Formula One pole position. As he climbed out of the car, the team rushed to congratulate him. Even Fernando Alonso gave him a handshake, though his smile seemed forced. Race day was cool and cloudy. Lewis sat in the garage, helmet beside him, reading Trevor's note, as had become his ritual. 10 years had passed since a schoolboy had written those cruel words, but they still had power. Not to hurt him anymore, but to drive him. When the race began, Lewis got a perfect start and pulled away from the field. Lap after lap, he extended his lead. His driving was smooth and precise, like he'd been racing in Formula One for years, not months. "Box this lap, Lewis," his engineer called. Time for a pit stop to change tires. The McLaren crew was ready. 4 fresh tires, a splash of fuel, and Lewis was back on track in under 8 seconds. With 10 laps to go, Lewis was 15 seconds ahead of second place. Barring disaster, his first win was in sight. "Car feels good," Lewis reported calmly, though his heart was racing. When he crossed the finish line, Lewis punched the air inside his cockpit. "Yes!" he shouted over the radio. "Thank you, everyone. Amazing job." On the podium, spraying champagne for the first time as a winner, Lewis couldn't stop smiling. The Canadian fans chanted his name. He had just become the first black driver to win a Formula One race. In the press conference afterward, a journalist asked, "Did you ever doubt you could win in your rookie season?" Lewis thought of Trevor's note. "There were people who doubted me," he said, "but I never doubted myself." Lewis won again at the next race in Indianapolis. 2 wins in a row as a rookie was unprecedented. The racing world was stunned. Lewis Hamilton wasn't just good. He was rewriting what was possible in Formula One, but success brought new challenges. Some fans didn't like seeing a black driver win. Lewis received racist messages online. At the Spanish Grand Prix, some spectators wore blackface to mock him. "Don't let it get to you," Anthony advised. "They're trying to distract you." Lewis nodded, but the words hurt. He'd faced racism his whole life, but now it was on a global stage. Yet somehow, it connected back to that note from school. The message was the same. "You don't belong here." Before the next race, Lewis took out Trevor's note again. The words "still" stung, but now they also made him stronger. If he could overcome the bullying at school, he could overcome this too. As the season continued, tension grew between Lewis and Alonso. The two-time champion hadn't expected his rookie teammate to challenge him so quickly. "He's getting special treatment from the team," Alonso complained to the press. Lewis tried to stay focused on racing, but the situation was difficult. At the Hungarian Grand Prix, things exploded when Alonso deliberately blocked Lewis in qualifying. "This isn't how teammates should behave," Lewis told reporters afterward. The McLaren team was splitting apart. Ron Dennis had to step in, reminding both drivers that they raced for McLaren first, themselves second. Despite the drama, Lewis kept performing on track. After 12 races, he led the championship, something no rookie had ever done. Can Hamilton really win the title in his first year? Newspapers asked. The pressure was intense. Lewis couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. Cameras followed his every move. Everyone wanted a piece of him. Interviews, autographs, photos. Through it all, Lewis kept his ritual. Before each race, alone in the garage, he'd take out Trevor's note, now so fragile it might tear if handled roughly. The words had been with him from go-karts to Formula One. They reminded him of how far he'd come and how much farther he could go. Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different. 9 podiums in his first 9 races, 2 victories, leading the World Championship as a rookie. With every lap, Lewis was proving those words wrong. And yet, deep inside, part of him was grateful for that note. Without knowing it, Trevor had given Lewis a secret weapon, a constant reminder to prove the doubters wrong, to turn different into special, to use the pain as fuel for his fire. With 7 races left in the season, Lewis Hamilton was on track to achieve the impossible, becoming a Formula One world champion in his debut year. Lewis led the championship with 7 races to go, but Formula One can change quickly. At the Chinese Grand Prix, disaster struck. Rain fell heavily on the Shanghai circuit. Lewis was leading the race, but his tires were worn down to the canvas. The team waited too long to call him in for new tires. When Lewis finally tried to enter the pit lane, his car slid straight on at the tight entrance and got stuck in a small gravel trap. Lewis sat in his car, helpless, as track marshals came to push him out. His race was over. His championship lead was shrinking. "These things happen," Lewis told reporters afterward, hiding his disappointment. "We'll come back stronger." But privately, Lewis was devastated. He'd been so close to extending his championship lead. Now, heading into the final race in Brazil, he was just 4 points ahead of his teammate Alonso, with Ferrari's Kimi Räikkönen also in contention. The Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos would decide the championship. Lewis needed only to finish 5th or better to become world champion, no matter what his rivals did. The night before the race, Lewis couldn't sleep. He took out Trevor's note and read those familiar words. "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." "Not this time," Lewis whispered to himself. "Not tomorrow." Race day dawned hot and humid in São Paulo. Lewis qualified second, a perfect position to secure the championship. His dad gave him a hug before he climbed into the car. "Just drive your race," Anthony said. "You've earned this." When the lights went out, Lewis got a good start, but Fernando Alonso passed him into the first corner. Lewis stayed calm. 3rd place was still more than enough to win the title. But on lap 8, disaster struck. Lewis's car suddenly slowed. the gearbox failing to select the right gear. As he struggled with the controls, cars swarmed past him. By the time he fixed the problem, he had dropped to 18th place. "Stay calm, Lewis," his engineer said over the radio. "We can still do this." Lewis took a deep breath and began fighting back through the field. One by one, he overtook cars, pushing his McLaren to the limit. The championship that had seemed certain was now hanging by a thread. With 20 laps to go, Lewis had climbed back to 7th. He needed 5th to win the title. "2 more positions, Lewis," his engineer encouraged. "You can do this." Lewis charged forward, passing one more car to reach 6th. Just one more position needed, but time was running out. The checkered flag waved with Lewis still in 6th place. Kimi Räikkönen won the race and, by just 1 point, the World Championship. Lewis had lost the title in his rookie year by a single point. In the McLaren garage, Anthony put his arm around his son's shoulders. No words were needed. They had come so close. That night, alone in his hotel room, Lewis took out Trevor's note one last time. For the first time, the words felt true again. He hadn't won the championship. Maybe he really was too different. Lewis carefully folded the note and put it away. The season was over. 4 months later, Lewis was back in a Formula One car for the start of the 2008 season. The disappointment of Brazil was behind him. This was a new chance. Alonso had left McLaren after the tensions of 2007, returning to Renault. Lewis's new teammate was Heikki Kovalainen. "This year, we finished the job," Ron Dennis told Lewis before the first race. The 2008 season was a battle from the start. Lewis's main rival was Ferrari's Felipe Massa, a fast Brazilian driver with the full might of the Ferrari team behind him. Throughout the year, they traded victories. Lewis would win, then Massa. The championship lead changed hands several times. It was one of the closest title fights in Formula One history. Before each race, Lewis still took out Trevor's note. The heartbreak of 2007 had only made those words more powerful. Now they reminded him not only of childhood bullying, but also of how a championship had slipped through his fingers. "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." The words drove him even harder. The championship again came down to the final race in Brazil. This time, Lewis needed only to finish 5th or better, while Massa needed to win and hope Lewis finished 6th or lower. Rain was falling at Interlagos. Lewis qualified 4th, in perfect position. His strategy was simple: drive a clean race, stay out of trouble, and secure the points needed. When the race started, Lewis maintained his position. But as the track began to dry, he started to struggle with tire temperature. Slowly, he dropped back to 5th. Still enough for the title, but with no margin for error. With 3 laps to go, more rain began to fall. Lewis and several other drivers pitted for wet tires. When he rejoined the track, he was in 6th place, 1 position short of what he needed. Ahead of him was Timo Glock, who had gambled on staying out on dry tires. As the rain intensified, Glock's car began slipping and sliding. On the final lap, Massa crossed the finish line first, winning the race. For about 30 seconds, the Ferrari team celebrated, believing Massa had won the championship. But on the last corner of the last lap, Lewis's McLaren caught the struggling Glock. "Is that Glock?" the commentator shouted as Lewis passed the Toyota. Driver. When Lewis crossed the line in 5th place, he had no idea if it was enough. Then his engineer's voice came over the radio. "Lewis, it's 5th place. You're world champion." At 23 years old, Lewis Hamilton had become the youngest Formula One world champion in history at that time. and the first black champion the sport had ever seen. As he climbed from his car in Parc Fermé, Lewis was overcome with emotion. Anthony rushed to embrace him, both men in tears. Later that night, Lewis sat alone in his room, championship trophy beside him. He took out Trevor's note and read it one more time. "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." He smiled. Different had just made history. Lewis returned for the 2009 season as the defending world champion. His McLaren car sported the number 1, marking him as the best driver in the world. But Formula One is never simple. When testing began, Lewis immediately felt something was wrong. The new McLaren MP424 was difficult to drive. It bounced around, in corners, and was slow on straightaways. "We're in trouble," Lewis told his engineers. "The car doesn't feel right." He was correct. When the season started in Australia, Lewis qualified 18th, near the back of the grid. The team that had fought for championships was suddenly struggling to score points. "Sometimes you have to take a step backward before you can move forward," Anthony reminded him. Lewis nodded, but it was hard to accept. While he struggled, a new team called Brawn GP dominated with driver Jenson Button winning race after race. The 2009 season became a test of character for Lewis. Instead of fighting for wins, he was battling for minor points. It was frustrating, but Lewis kept pushing. Late in the season, McLaren improved the car enough for Lewis to win 2 races. "This shows what we can do when everything works right," Lewis said after winning in Singapore. "We'll be back stronger next year." The 2010 season brought more challenges. McLaren's car was better, but still not the fastest. Red Bull Racing had built a superior car, and their driver Sebastian Vettel was becoming the new star of Formula One. Lewis fought hard, winning 3 races and staying in championship contention until late in the season. But mistakes crept in as he pushed beyond the car's limits. He crashed in Italy and Singapore, costing valuable points. Vettel won the championship, with Lewis finishing 4th. "We need to be better next year," Lewis told his team. "All of us." But 2011 was even more difficult. Lewis's personal life became complicated when he broke up with his girlfriend, pop star Nicole Scherzinger. The split affected his focus. On track, Lewis was involved in several incidents. He collided with other drivers and received penalties from race officials. The media criticized him harshly. "Hamilton has lost his way." One headline read, "The champion is cracking under pressure," said another. Lewis finished the season 5th in the championship, while his teammate Jenson Button finished 2nd. It was the first time Lewis had been beaten by a teammate over a full season. That December, Lewis made another painful decision. After 14 years working together, he and his father Anthony split professionally. Anthony would no longer manage Lewis's career. "I need to make my own decisions," Lewis explained. "I'll always need my dad, but as my father, not my manager." The relationship became strained. Another support system in Lewis's life had changed. Before the 2012 season, Lewis took out Trevor's note again. The paper was so fragile now, yellowed with age. He had proven the words wrong by becoming a champion, but lately, doubt had crept back in. Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different. Different. Lewis had always been different. His skin color, his background, his style. Now he wondered if being different was holding him back. The 2012 season was better on track. Lewis won 4 races and challenged for the championship until reliability issues with his car ended his hopes. Too many times, his McLaren broke down while he was leading races. After a mechanical failure in Singapore, Lewis sat with his helmet on in the garage, hiding his disappointment. The team had let him down again. That's when Lewis made the biggest decision of his career. Mercedes, a team that had returned to Formula One in 2010, offered him a contract. They weren't winning races yet, but they promised Lewis they were building for the future. Most experts thought it would be career suicide to leave McLaren, one of the most successful teams in Formula One history, for Mercedes, who had won just one race in 3 years. "You'd be crazy to leave," one journalist told Lewis. "Mercedes isn't a top team," Lewis thought carefully. McLaren had been his home since he was a teenager. They had given him his chance in Formula One, but something told him it was time for a change. Before making his decision, Lewis spent a night alone, thinking about his journey. He took out Trevor's note and read those familiar words again. "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." Maybe being different meant making different choices. Maybe it meant taking risks others wouldn't take. Lewis signed with Mercedes. For the 2013 season, the announcement shocked the racing world. Many called it the biggest mistake of his career. "Hamilton has thrown away his chance of winning another title," one former champion said. Lewis's first season with Mercedes was a building year. The car was better than expected, and Lewis even won a race in Hungary. But Sebastian Vettel and Red Bull dominated, winning their 4th straight championship. Lewis finished 4th overall, respectable, but far from where he wanted to be. As 2013 ended, some wondered if Lewis Hamilton, once the sport's brightest star, would ever win another championship. 4 years had passed since his 2008 title. Other drivers had risen to prominence while Lewis seemed stuck in the wilderness, still searching for a way back to the top. But deep inside, Lewis knew something others didn't. Mercedes was preparing something special for 2014. A new era of Formula One was about to begin, and Lewis Hamilton was perfectly positioned to dominate it. In 2014, Formula One introduced new rules. Cars would now use hybrid engines, combining traditional gasoline power with electric energy. Teams had to build completely new power units, and nobody knew which team would get it right. When Lewis first drove the new Mercedes W05 in testing, he felt something special. The car was incredibly fast and reliable. Mercedes engineers had spent years preparing for these rule changes, and their hard work had paid off. "This might be the best Formula One car ever built," Lewis told his team boss, Toto Wolff. Toto smiled. "Then let's make the most of it." At the first race in Australia, Lewis took pole position by nearly a second, an enormous margin in Formula One. Though he had to retire from the race due to an engine problem, his teammate Nico Rosberg won easily. It quickly became clear that Mercedes had built a car far superior to their rivals. As the season progressed, Lewis and Nico dominated, often finishing races 30 seconds ahead of the competition. But what should have been an easy championship turned into an intense battle between teammates. Lewis and Nico had been friends since their karting days as teenagers. Now, with the championship at stake, that friendship was tested. Tensions exploded at the Monaco Grand Prix when Nico made a suspicious mistake in qualifying that prevented Lewis from setting a faster lap time. Lewis believed Nico had done it deliberately to secure pole position. "That's not how teammates should behave," Lewis told reporters, echoing his words about Alonso years earlier. The relationship deteriorated further in Belgium, where Nico collided with Lewis on track, giving Lewis a puncture that ruined his race. Nico admitted he did it on purpose, Lewis revealed afterward, shocking the Formula One world. Mercedes executives called an emergency meeting. Toto Wolff warned both drivers that team orders would be imposed if they couldn't race cleanly. Through all this drama, Lewis found strength in adversity. just as he had since childhood. Before each race, he still took a moment alone to look at Trevor's note. Now, the words drove him not just to prove doubters wrong, but to secure his place in history. Lewis won 11 races that season, clinching his second world championship at the final race in Abu Dhabi. Standing on the podium as champion again, 6 years after his first title, Lewis felt vindicated. His gamble to join Mercedes had paid off spectacularly. Lewis's life changed in other ways too. Living in Monaco and traveling the world, he embraced interests outside of racing. He developed his own fashion style, often arriving at racetracks in clothes he had designed himself. He recorded music in professional studios, collaborating with famous artists. He attended fashion shows in Paris, New York, and Milan. Some racing fans and media criticized these activities. Hamilton isn't focused on racing, they complained. He's distracted by celebrity lifestyle. Lewis ignored them. I race better when I can express all sides of myself, he explained. Being different makes me stronger. Being different. The words from Trevor's note had once been meant as an insult. Now, Lewis embraced his difference, celebrating what made him unique. The 2015 season brought more success. Lewis won 10 races and secured his third world championship with 3 races to spare. He had joined the ranks of true Formula One greats, but his rivalry with Nico Rosberg intensified. After losing 2 championships to Lewis, Nico was more determined than ever. In 2016, Nico raised his game. While Lewis still showed more raw speed, Nico was more consistent. When Lewis suffered engine failures in Malaysia and other technical problems, Nico capitalized. The championship again came down to the final race in Abu Dhabi. Lewis needed Nico to finish 4th or lower, while he had to win. Lewis did his part, winning the race in dominant fashion, but Nico finished 2nd, enough to win the championship by 5 points. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Lewis had won more races than Nico, but lost the title due to reliability issues beyond his control. A week later, Nico shocked everyone by announcing his retirement from Formula One. Having achieved his dream of winning a world championship, he was stepping away from the sport. "I've climbed my mountain," Nico explained. "I'm at the peak, and it feels right to retire." Lewis would need a new teammate for 2017. Mercedes chose Valtteri Bottas, a quick but less confrontational driver from Finland. With Nico gone, Lewis seemed more relaxed. He modified his training and preparation, finding a better work-life balance. He spent more time on his other passions, music, fashion, and supporting causes he believed in. One of those causes was diversity in motorsport. Lewis never forgot being one of the only black faces at the track. Now, as a multiple world champion, he used his platform to speak out. "Racing needs to be more accessible to people from all backgrounds," Lewis said. "The lack of diversity in Formula One shows that the system isn't working properly." Some fans didn't like Lewis speaking about social issues. They told him to stick to racing. But Lewis refused to be silenced. "I race cars, but I'm a human being. First," he responded, "I have a responsibility to use my voice for good." On track, Lewis was unstoppable. He won his 4th world championship in 2017, matching Sebastian Vettel's total. In 2018, he secured his 5th title, putting him on par with the great Juan Manuel Fangio. By 2019, Lewis was chasing the records of Michael Schumacher, the most successful Formula One driver in history. When Lewis won his 6th championship that year, he was just 1 away from equaling Schumacher's record of 7. Before the 2020 season, Lewis took out Trevor's note again. The paper was now preserved in a special frame in his Monaco apartment. He didn't need to read it anymore. The words were etched in his memory, but seeing it reminded him of his journey. Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different. Those words that once hurt now filled him with pride. Being different hadn't held him back. It had propelled him forward. Being different had made him a champion, not just in racing, but in life. The boy from Stevenage who faced bullies and racism had grown into a man who was changing the face of Formula One, and his greatest achievements were still to come. The 2020 Formula One season was unlike any other. A global pandemic called COVID-19 forced races to be cancelled or postponed. When the season finally began in July, races took place without fans, on empty tracks that echoed with the sound of engines, but no cheers. For Lewis, this strange season became one of his most important. He was chasing Michael Schumacher's seemingly unbreakable records, 91 race wins and 7 world championships. Records are meant to be broken, Lewis said, when asked about Schumacher's achievements. But I never thought I'd get close to Michael's numbers. He was my hero growing up. In Portugal, Lewis won his 92nd race, passing Schumacher to become the most successful Formula One driver in history. As he climbed out of his car, emotion overcame him. The boy who was once told he'd never be a winner had just won more races than anyone ever. "This is beyond my wildest dreams," Lewis said, his voice breaking. "For all the kids out there who dream the impossible, you can do it too." Later that year, at a wet and slippery Turkish Grand Prix, Lewis secured his 7th World Championship with a masterful drive from 6th on the grid to 1st at the checkered flag. He had equaled Schumacher's record of 7 titles. Over the team radio, Lewis could barely speak through tears. That's for all the kids who dreamed the impossible. In the press conference afterward, Lewis reflected on his journey. "When I was younger, I didn't have anyone of the same color as me in the sport, so it was easy to think that's not possible to get there. But I hope this shows kids that it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, what your religion is, you can still dream big." Lewis was no longer just breaking records. He was breaking barriers. Lewis's success gave him a powerful platform, and he used it to speak about issues he cared about. In 2020, after the death of George Floyd in America, Lewis became vocal about racial injustice. Before each race, while other drivers stood for national anthems, Lewis took a knee. He wore shirts with messages supporting Black Lives Matter. He called on Formula One and other drivers to recognize racism and fight against it. Some fans criticized him, saying politics should stay out of sports, but Lewis refused to be silenced. "Not political," he explained. "I'm just fighting for human rights and equality." Lewis also pushed Formula One to address its lack of diversity. He established the Hamilton Commission to study why so few black people worked in motorsport, and to find ways to change this. "Formula One is still a white-dominated sport," Lewis pointed out. "That needs to change." Lewis donated millions of dollars to support underrepresented groups in racing. He established Mission 44, a foundation helping young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and he pushed his Mercedes team to paint their traditionally silver cars black in support of diversity. Through all of this, Lewis remembered his own journey. How different he had felt as a young black kid in karting. How Trevor's note had both hurt him and motivated him. Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different. That difference that once made him a target now made him a leader. Lewis's racing continued to reach new heights. In 2021, he passed 100 pole positions, the first driver to ever achieve this milestone. Soon after, he won his 100th Grand Prix. Numbers that seemed impossible were now in the record books. But 2021 also brought a new challenge. Max Verstappen, a young, aggressive driver for Red Bull Racing. 24-year-old Max had grown up watching Lewis win championships. Now he wanted to dethrone the king. Their battle was one of the most intense in Formula One history. They crashed together at the British Grand Prix, with Max ending up in the hospital. They collided again in Italy, with Max's car landing on top of Lewis's. The championship swung back and forth between them. For Lewis, the fight with Max felt different from his earlier battles. This wasn't just about winning another title. It was about securing his legacy as the greatest of all time. Before each race, Lewis still took a quiet moment to think about his journey. From that used go-kart, his dad bought to 7 world championships. From being bullied at school to being knighted by the Queen of England as Sir Lewis Hamilton. And through it all, Trevor's note had been with him. First as a painful reminder of others' doubts, then as fuel for his fire, and finally as a symbol of how far he had come. As the 2021 season reached its finale in Abu Dhabi, Lewis and Max were tied on points. Whoever finished ahead would be world champion. Lewis led most of the race and seemed certain to win his record-breaking 8th championship. But a controversial decision by race officials following a late crash changed everything. Max, on fresher tires, passed Lewis on the very last lap. Lewis lost the championship in the most heartbreaking way possible. In the garage afterward, Mercedes team members were furious, arguing with officials about the decision. But Lewis remained, dignified in defeat, congratulating Max and thanking his team. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, Lewis took out his phone and looked at a photo of Trevor's note, now safely preserved back home. Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different. For the first time in many years, the words stung again. He had come so close to breaking Schumacher's record, to becoming, definitively, the greatest of all time. And it had slipped away, in the most controversial circumstances. But as the initial pain subsided, Lewis found new determination. This setback, like all the others in his life, would only make him stronger. The boy who overcame bullying and racism to reach the top of Formula One wasn't going to let one defeat define him. The note that had driven him for over 20 years still had power. What once was meant to tear him down had built him up, making him not just a champion, but a voice for change. His journey wasn't over. There were more races to win, more records to break, and more barriers to destroy. The 2022 season brought major changes to Formula One. New rules meant completely redesigned. Cars that looked and behaved differently. The goal was to create closer racing and give more teams a chance to win. For Mercedes and Lewis, these changes created unexpected problems. Their new W13 car had a major issue called porpoising. It bounced up and down violently on straights, making it difficult to drive and painfully uncomfortable for the drivers. "It feels like the car is trying to throw me out of the cockpit," Lewis explained after testing. "And we're slow, really slow, for the first time since joining Mercedes." In 2013, Lewis found himself in a car that couldn't win races. Red Bull and Ferrari were now the fastest teams, with Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc fighting for victories. Some fans and media who had grown tired of Lewis's dominance celebrated his struggles. Social media filled with comments saying Lewis had only won because he had the best car. And now everyone could see he wasn't that special. "Hamilton is finished," one headline declared. "The king has been dethroned." Lewis tried to ignore the negativity. At 37 years old, he had faced doubters his entire career. This was just another challenge to overcome. "We've been knocked down, but we'll get back up," Lewis assured his team. "We always do." Throughout the difficult season, Lewis worked tirelessly with Mercedes engineers to improve the car. His experience and technical feedback proved invaluable. Slowly, the team made progress. At the Brazilian Grand Prix late in the season, Lewis finally achieved a breakthrough, winning his first race of the year in spectacular fashion. Starting from 8th on the grid, he overtook car after car, including Max Verstappen, to claim an emotional victory. "This one feels more special than many of my wins," Lewis said afterward. "When you fall down, when people say you're done, getting back up is the greatest feeling." The 2023 season began with more challenges. Mercedes still hadn't fully solved their car problems, and Lewis continued to struggle for results. Some younger drivers began to wonder if Lewis's time had passed. Maybe it's time for Hamilton to retire and let the new generation take over, one driver suggested to the media. Those words sparked something in Lewis. They reminded him of Trevor's note, of being told he didn't belong, of being written off. Before the next race, Lewis did something he hadn't done in years. He took the preserved note from its frame in his home and brought it to the track. Before qualifying, he read those familiar words: "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different." Inspired, Lewis put his car on pole position for the first time in nearly 2 years. The following day, he converted that pole into victory, silencing those who had doubted him. "I never lost belief in myself," Lewis said on the podium. "When you've been told your whole life that you can't do something, proving people wrong becomes a superpower." As the 2023 season progressed, the rivalry between Lewis and Max Verstappen reignited. Though Red Bull still had the faster car, Mercedes had closed the gap enough for Lewis to challenge occasionally. Their battles on track were fierce and sometimes controversial. At the Monaco Grand Prix, they banged wheels in the tunnel, with Max accusing Lewis of dangerous driving. At Silverstone, they ran side by side through multiple corners, neither willing to yield. "There's a special intensity when I race Max," Lewis admitted. "After what happened in 2021, there's unfinished business between us." What made their rivalry unique was their different approaches to racing. Max was aggressive and uncompromising, willing to push the limits of the rules. Lewis was more calculated and experienced, choosing his moments carefully. Their contrasting styles represented 2 different eras of Formula One. Max was the future, but Lewis wasn't ready to be the past. By late 2023, rumors circulated that Lewis might leave Mercedes. Ferrari, Formula One's most iconic team, was reportedly offering him a contract. After years of loyalty to Mercedes, Lewis faced a difficult choice. "I need to think about my legacy," Lewis told close friends. "What I want the final chapters of my career to look like." In the end, Lewis chose to stay with Mercedes, signing a new contract that would keep him racing into his 40s. His mission wasn't complete. He still wanted that 8th World Championship. "I started this journey with Mercedes when many people said it was a mistake," Lewis explained. "We've achieved so much together, and we're not done yet." As the 2024 season approached, Mercedes worked frantically to build a car that could challenge for championships again. The team had learned valuable lessons from their struggles. Lewis, too, had evolved. The difficult years had made him more resilient, more appreciative of the good times, and more determined than ever to reclaim his place at the top. The boy from Stevenage, who kept a bully's note to fuel his ambition, had become a man who used every setback as motivation to rise higher. Each time the world tried to write him off, Lewis Hamilton rewrote the narrative, and his greatest chapter might still be ahead. Winter testing for the 2025 Formula One season had just finished when Lewis received an unexpected email. It was from the principal of his old school in Stevenage. "Dear Sir Lewis," it began, We're holding a special career day next month for our students. Many of our children come from backgrounds similar to yours, and we believe your story would inspire them tremendously. Would you consider being our guest speaker? Lewis read the message twice. He hadn't been back to his old school since leaving as a teenager. The thought of returning brought mixed emotions. It was where he'd struggled with dyslexia, faced bullying, and received Trevor's note, but also where teachers had supported him and where he'd first dreamed of becoming a racing driver. After thinking it over, Lewis replied with a simple message. "I'd be honored." The school looked smaller than Lewis remembered. He parked his electric car outside and took a moment to collect his thoughts. In his pocket was Trevor's note, carefully preserved in its protective sleeve. He had brought it along, feeling it somehow completed the circle of his journey. Inside, excited children filled the assembly hall. Some wore Mercedes caps and Lewis Hamilton t-shirts. Their eyes widened as the 7-time world champion walked onto the stage. "Good morning, everyone," Lewis began. "The last time I was in this hall, I was sitting where you are now, dreaming about racing cars." For the next 40 minutes, Lewis shared his story, from karting at Rye House to winning world championships. He talked about the challenges of being different, of facing racism, and of proving doubters wrong. "There was a boy in my class," Lewis said, not mentioning Trevor by name, "who wrote me a note saying I would never be a winner because I was too different. For years, I kept that note. Before every race, I would read it, using those words to fuel my determination." A hush fell over the hall. Even the teachers were leaning forward, captivated. "The lesson I learned is that when someone says you can't do something, it doesn't have to defeat you. It can drive you." As Lewis concluded his talk, students raised their hands with questions. He answered each one thoughtfully, remembering how it felt to be their age, full of dreams and uncertainties. After the event, as Lewis chatted with teachers in the corridor, a man approached him. Slightly shorter than Lewis, with a receding hairline and glasses, he looked vaguely familiar. "Lewis," the man said hesitantly, "you probably don't remember me. I'm Trevor Matthews." Lewis felt a jolt of recognition. This was the boy who had bullied him, who had written the note that had both wounded and motivated him for over 20 years. "I remember you," Lewis said quietly. "I heard your talk," Trevor said, his voice unsteady. "The note you mentioned. That was mine, wasn't it?" Lewis nodded. "I want to apologize," Trevor continued. "I was a terrible kid back then. I made your life miserable, and I've regretted it more and more over the years." Lewis studied Trevor's face, searching for the mean boy he remembered. Instead, he saw a man who looked genuinely remorseful. "I've followed your whole career," Trevor said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a folder and opened it, revealing newspaper clippings, magazine articles, and printed photos, all about Lewis's achievements over the years. Lewis was stunned. "You kept all these?" Trevor nodded. "Every race, every championship. It started as a way to remind myself how wrong I was about you. Then it became genuine admiration. What you've accomplished is incredible." Lewis didn't know what to say. For years, he had imagined Trevor as an antagonist in his story. Now, the real person stood before him, collections of his achievements in hand. "There's something else," Trevor said. "About the note." Lewis tensed slightly. He had carried those words for so long. "You never saw all of it, did you?" Trevor asked. "The whole note?" "What do you mean?" Lewis asked, confused. Trevor looked down. "Ms. Parker ripped it away before you could read the second page. I always wondered if you'd seen it all." Lewis reached into his pocket and carefully took out the preserved note in its protective sleeve. This is what I've kept all these years." Trevor looked at it, then shook his head sadly. "That's only the first part." From his folder, Trevor removed a yellowed piece of paper, carefully preserved just as Lewis had preserved his half. He handed it to Lewis. "This is the second page. I kept it all this time, too." With trembling fingers, Lewis took the paper. Below the familiar words, "Hamilton will never be a winner. He's too different," was more writing he had never seen. "That's what they said about me, too. But different is what makes champions. Prove them wrong, like I couldn't." Lewis stared at the words, trying to process their meaning. "I was bullied too," Trevor explained quietly. "For being small, for my glasses, for being poor. I was angry and took it out on you. When I wrote that note, it was part mockery, part, I don't know, a twisted kind of hope that maybe you could do what I couldn't." Lewis looked up, meeting Trevor's eyes. "You were bullied too?" Trevor nodded. "I handled it by becoming a bully myself. It's no excuse, but it's the truth." Lewis looked back at the complete note, seeing it whole for the first time. The words that had driven him for decades now held an entirely different meaning. "All these years," Lewis said softly, "I thought these words were meant to tear me down. But they weren't, were they? Not completely." "I was a confused kid dealing with my own pain," Trevor said. "Part of me was jealous of your confidence, your talent. Another part wanted to see you succeed." Lewis felt a strange mix of emotions: confusion, understanding, even a kind of peace. The note that had fueled his fire for so long was not what he had believed it to be. The story he had told himself was only half the truth. "Thank you for showing me this," Lewis said finally. "It changes everything." As they parted ways, Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, global icon, and once bullied schoolboy, realized that sometimes understanding someone's full story can change the meaning of everything that came before. Thanks for joining me till the end. Let me know in the comments from where you are tuning in. Drop your city and country name in the comments. Also, make sure to subscribe to this channel if you love Lewis Hamilton. See you in the next one.